Hello there! Today, we're going underground, slipping through narrow tunnels, and stepping into our ant nest as if we were visiting a living city. Take a deep breath, catch the scent of damp soil and a gentle hint of tree resin, and hear the tiny footsteps tapping in a slow, steady heartbeat. Down here, every room is a story. Every turn is a shared decision of the whole colony. And every movement has a clear reason. Come close and look carefully, because from a cloudy white egg to skies thick with wings, the entire life cycle of ants will open right before your eyes. You step into the first corridor and feel the air noticeably cooler than outside. The ant nest is not just a cave, but a network with a main axis, side alleys, and vertical shafts like breathing tubes that let air move in and out. On the upper level, ventilation openings sit close to the surface, catching light breezes and guiding them along a roundabout route downward. In the middle level, junctions divide the nest into zones. Some rooms are for rearing larvae, some are for storing dry food, and some are for handling refuse and waste. The deepest level holds the quietest chamber, where the queen rests and lays eggs steadily. Everything is layered to keep temperature and humidity stable, because eggs and larvae need just enough warmth, while mold must be kept at a safe distance. You walk along a slightly sloped passage. The earthen walls are smooth and dry. Here and there a small niche opens like a window, leading to a vent shaft that runs straight up. When the wind shifts, the nest adjusts the airflow by opening one door and closing another, the way people rotate shutters. Some spots are built higher to avoid flooding in heavy rain, and some floors are set at a gentle angle so water drains toward a sump. To outsiders, it looks chaotic, but the residents know every turn. You stop in a wide room at the center of the nest. Here, experienced workers dry leftover bits of food, sorting them by size and moisture. Dry seeds are pushed into a corner with a firm base to keep them from absorbing dampness. Sugar-rich pieces are set aside, so other ants can carry them to feed the larvae. A small channel leads to the trash area, where anything spoiled is gathered and gradually dragged away from the nest. Routing things this way keeps the living space clean and limits strange odors that might draw in enemies. You follow the path down to a deeper level. The air grows a bit warmer and more humid. This is the nursery zone, so the earthen walls are softer and easy to clean. Many workers take shifts wiping surfaces with their mouths and feet, picking up every crumb. Cleanliness is not just for neatness, it keeps the larvae from meeting pathogens. You'll notice a few drop-off points like exchange stations, where returning foragers pass food to workers inside. All the work is arranged in a clear flow, because only when each room serves its function can this small city run smoothly. You head back to the main corridor and look up at the mouth of a shaft. The light that filters down is only a faint streak, but it's enough to reveal the tiny vent tubes set into the walls. These tubes interlace like a discrete mesh, helping the nest stay stable in scorching heat or cold rain. There's no architect ant standing in the middle giving orders, yet every clod of earth ends up in the right place after countless trials and choices. Over time, the whole structure becomes a sturdy home, cool and dry, quiet enough for eggs to hatch and safe enough for the entire colony to grow. You step into a warm chamber where milky white eggs lie arranged in small clusters. The eggs are light as dust. Workers must use their mandibles to lift and set them down gently to aerate them and keep the right degree of dryness. After a few days, the thin shells soften and open, and a small larva appears, soft-bodied, milky white, legless, and unable to feed itself. The larvae must be given droplets of food that the workers have pre-chewed and portioned. Feeding happens on a schedule, each time a small amount, just enough for a fragile body to digest. You stand still and watch how the workers pass food along. Workers returning from outside bring nutrient-rich morsels. They don't hurry to put them in storage. Instead, they pass a portion mouth to mouth to the nurses who tend the larvae.
This method keeps quantity and quality under control while keeping the nursery clean, since there's no need to scatter lots of crumbs. After feeding, each larvae is turned gently so it doesn't rest in one position for too long, avoiding dampness or dirt on one side. Tiny drops of water are also passed mouth to mouth to keep the air humid enough without letting moisture pool. When they reach the right size, the larvae enter the pupal stage. Some species spin a thin cocoon, while others leave the body exposed. In this stage, the body changes dramatically. Body parts take shape, muscles develop, and the mandibles harden. The workers keep rotating the pupae, wiping the surfaces clean, and removing every bit of debris to prevent mold. This is when calm and safety matter most, so the room is guarded by a group of workers who seldom go outside, are still in good health, and react quickly. On the day the pupae emerge, the chamber seems to pick up a joyful rhythm. The newly born are pale, soft-bodied, and slow on their feet. They don't rush outside. They stay in the nest to learn how to tend larvae, how to clean, and how to arrange the stores. Light indoor work helps their bodies harden, their jaws strengthen, and their reflexes sharpen. After a time, when they're truly sturdy, they move to transport and storage, and only then do they head out to forage. Step by step, this builds a steady assembly line in which every age has fitting work, and the whole colony grows past the small risks that could spoil an entire young generation. You leave the brood chamber and step into a busier corridor, where workers constantly tap their antennae on the ground and on one another. Here, smell is not just the scent of soil or sap, but a clear signaling system. Each kind of signal is a different chain of compounds used to say different things, laying a trail to food, sounding an alarm at a stranger, calling for more help to haul a large piece, or identifying nestmates. When a worker finds a good food source, it places tiny scent points on the ground to make a guide path. The sisters behind will check it with their antennae, memorize it, and reinforce it with fresh scent points. You lower yourself to the corridor floor and sense a thin scent line leading toward the nest entrance. This trail is laid sparsely, but it's enough to guide. If the food source is truly abundant, the scent points will grow stronger and denser. If the source is only temporary, the trail will fade quickly so the colony won't waste workers. When danger appears, a different signal snaps into place, making every nearby worker stop, raise their heads, and prepare to defend. The differences among signals lie in their very odors, and each worker reads them the way people read road markings on a familiar map. Beyond scent signals, you also hear faint vibrations carried through the soil when someone rubs part of the body against something hard. When the ground transmits a pulse, another group immediately slows and slips to the sides to clear a path for a transport team. Vibration works like a small bell that coordinates movement in tight spaces, where scent can be pulled away by drafts or masked by other odors. You move closer to the nest entrance and find a shared notice board made of smell. The colony's odor coats each individual like an ID tag. Anyone carrying a foreign scent is noticed at once. The nest odor isn't completely fixed. It's refreshed over time through antennal touches, grooming, and simply living together. That is how nestmates recognize one another and quickly and accurately sort onsiders from outsiders. This language of smell keeps collective decisions tidy, no noise, no chaos, yet always rich enough in information for the whole colony to move in a single, unified direction. You follow a group of workers down toward the quietest chamber at the bottom of the nest. There, the queen rests after a steady round of egg-laying. Some days there are many, some days fewer. But the overall pace stays stable, so the colony won't run short of hands when it matters. The fascinating part is that the queen can decide which eggs will become males and which will become females. Unfertilized eggs develop into males. Fertilized eggs develop into females. This split sounds odd if you're used to both males and females coming from fertilized eggs, but here unfertilized eggs still grow normally and become healthy males. The fact that unfertilized eggs become males leads to an important outcome. A male takes his instructions from only one side, the queen, while a female takes hers from two sides, the queen and the male that mated with her earlier. Because of this, among daughters of the same mother, the degree of kinship has a special pattern compared with many other animals. That helps make cooperation among the females in the nest especially strong. When workers help raise larvae that are the queen's daughters, they're raising young that are very closely related to them. Their effort isn't only for the common good, it also serves the interests of their own close bloodline. You see the queen shift her body slowly. With each egg she lays, she can adjust whether the egg passes through a small chamber holding stored sperm or bypasses it. If it passes through, the egg is fertilized and becomes a female. If it doesn't, the egg develops into a male. This simple but effective control lets the queen shape the workforce to the colony's needs, for example, adding more female workers to expand the nest or producing males for the coming season of winged mating flights. You leave the chamber in silence. Outside, the worker teams keep up their daily routines. The nursery, the food stores, the transport routes, and the gate patrol all run smoothly. At the center of it all is the queen, who keeps the colony's reproductive rhythm. The kinship puzzle is solved in this very particular way, allowing the colony to maintain a high spirit of cooperation and avoid wasting energy on pointless competition among members of the same nest. You lift your head at the nest entrance and feel the air turn more humid, the soil softer after the first rain of the season. This is when the whole forest changes its rhythm, and the ant colony does too. In the days before, the nest had quietly raised a brood with wings. Winged males and females were tended more carefully, packed with extra energy, and held for a favorable weather signal. When humidity rises, the temperature eases, and the wind is moderate, the colony brings the winged generation up near the entrance all at once. You see the ground around the nest suddenly grow busy. Wingless workers move about to direct traffic, clear obstacles, widen the exit, and take positions at key points to keep the way open. When the sun climbs high and the light steadies, the winged ants take a short running start, spread their wings and shoot upward. The sky above you fills with delicate wings. Groups fly in streams, meet in pockets of still air, and mate. The moment is brief, but long enough to exchange what's needed for a new life cycle. Afterward, the females look for a safe place to land. You see one drop to the soft ground, quietly snap off her wings, and begin to crawl. Breaking off the wings isn't a sign of exhaustion, but a clear transition. From here on, she will not return to the sky. She steps into the role of a new queen of a new nest. She finds a crack in the soil, digs a small chamber, seals the door, and lies still. Inside her body is a small pouch that has stored sperm from the flight just now. This pouch will keep the sperm alive for the long term, to be used gradually over many years. The first days in the dark chamber are difficult, but decisive. The new queen relies on stored energy to lay the first batch of eggs and raise the first workers. If she is too weak, the colony won't make it past this stage. If she's resilient enough, a few weeks later, the chamber door opens, the first workers appear, and they get to work, enlarging the nest, finding food, and tending fresh larvae. That is the moment a second underground city begins to take shape, repeating what you've already seen, but adjusted to a new home. The sky has just closed behind you, and below the surface, another life cycle is quietly beginning. Follow a young queen who has just landed after the day when the sky was filled with wings. She snaps off her own wings and chooses a patch of soil with just the right moisture, firm enough to dig, not so loose it collapses. She excavates a small chamber, barely big enough for her to turn around, seals the entrance with damp earth, and lies still to begin her first days without going outside. This is a phase of strict frugality, because the world beyond is still risky. The new queen will live off the energy stored in her body to raise her first eggs and larvae. In the days that follow, she lays small clusters of eggs. Slowly, her body converts stored energy into droplets of food for the larvae once the eggs hatch. She cannot forage, so every droplet is measured carefully. She keeps the chamber at a steady temperature by shifting her posture and shielding the eggs with her body when the air beyond the wall turns a bit chilly. When the larvae hatch, they are soft-bodied, milky white, and unable to do anything for themselves. The queen must continually release tiny portions of food, wipe down the damp surfaces, and rotate the larvae so their bedding does not foul. If her strength holds, these larvae will pupate and emerge as the first workers. That is the moment the small doorway is opened. The new workers leave the chamber, feel their way along a path, find the nearest food morsels, and haul them back to feed the next generation. From then on, the queen no longer has to do everything in that cramped space. She focuses on laying eggs steadily while the workers enlarge the chamber, clear auxiliary corridors, and set up handoff points to make transport more efficient. Not every species stays tucked inside during this first phase. In some, the young queen must risk early foraging because her reserves won't cover an entire first cohort of workers. In those cases, she opens the door briefly, rushes out, finds a nutrient-rich piece of food, then returns and seals the door again. Such trips are dangerous, but without them, the nest won't survive its opening stretch. Both nesting strategies aim at the same clear goal, producing that first generation of workers. Once workers are present, tasks can be shared, and the colony settles into a steadier rhythm. You stand at the chamber entrance and watch the nest expand day by day. The passageways take on an even smoothness. Drainage grooves are pushed farther out, and a small storage area begins to take shape. Everything unfolds slowly but surely. The first days of a new nest are not noisy or grand, yet every action is calculated to make it through a cold night, a sudden rain, and the lean hours. Looking back, you'll see a tiny city kindled from a cramped room, built on patience, thrift, and a work schedule arranged with meticulous care. You step into the nursery chamber, where newly emerged young workers are busy in the shade. Their jobs are to tend the larvae, tidy up, wipe down damp surfaces, and groom one another's antennae to stay clean. At this stage, their bodies are still soft and their colors pale, so staying indoors helps them avoid risks and gives time for their shells to harden. They learn to measure out food for each larvae, learn to rotate the pupae so the casing stays clean, and learn to recognize the colony's shared scent to tell nestmates from outsiders. As their bodies harden, they're gradually moved to storage and transport. There, they learn to sort food bits by moisture, learn to dry them at spots with a light breeze, and learn to manage foot traffic when a large transport line is about to pass through. They also start getting used to the nest entrance, where outside odors mix with the colony's scent and where sharper observation is needed. Every step outward comes with greater responsibility and higher risk, so this transition happens little by little. Once seasoned, they'll join the foraging teams and the gate guards. This is where agility, stamina, and quick reflexes matter. They'll be the first to lay a new scent trail when they find food, the ones who stop to direct traffic when a laden line returns, and the ones who signal caution when faced with a predator. These tasks drain energy quickly, so outdoor workers usually live shorter lives than those who work inside. Even so, by rotating jobs with age, the colony always has enough workers for every role. You watch a full day's work and see a system that runs like a clearly organized assembly line. The young stay inside to grow safely. The sturdier ones support storage and transport. The most experienced take on outside duties and accept greater risks. If one link runs into trouble, the flow shifts at once by pushing more workers forward from behind. This setup needs no single commander in the middle, because the shared scent, daily rhythm, and repeated habits keep the system steady. As night falls, each group returns to its place, checks on the larvae, tallies the stores, and gets ready for a new day with a schedule held in the memory of the whole colony.
Follow the group out of the nest on a scorching day. The ground is dry and heat shimmers up. In an open place with no clear tree markers, finding the way home can't rely on familiar objects. Instead, the group uses the number of steps taken and the direction of travel to calculate the route back. Each time they change direction, it's as if a small notebook in the mind records that segment. When it's time to return, the group follows the combined heading of the recorded legs and estimates how many steps it will take to touch the nest entrance. On days like this, the sky offers another useful aid. The light above carries patterns that the human eye can't see, but the small eyes of the workers can. These patterns reveal the sun's direction even when thin clouds drift over it, helping the group keep a steady course. Thanks to that, when they range far to find a scarce scrap of food, they can still come back with precision. Under the harsh sun, they move in short stretches, check their bearing, then go on again to avoid getting lost. You notice another interesting thing. When stride length changes, the distance estimate can drift. If someone has to walk with longer steps, they tend to overshoot the mark. If the steps are shorter, they stop too soon. This shows that the road home isn't just about remembering direction, but also a simple calculation based on the very steps taken. With that arithmetic, the group can widen the search area while still keeping a high chance of returning. As the sun sinks low, the group decides to head back. They check the sky once more, adjust their angle of travel, then follow a relatively straight line. Near the nest, the familiar scent rises more sharply. Scent trails from earlier trips also help guide the final stretch. The entrance opens, cooler and more humid inside. The whole group shares the work of moving the food piece into storage, drinking a little water, and checking the count. A sweltering day has passed, but the most important thing is that the way home always appears when needed, thanks to steps counted carefully, the sky pointing the way, and the smell of their own nest. You step onto a branch full of tender new leaves. Here, the residents don't dig into the ground to live. They draw the leaf edges together and stitch them into a cool green room. The method sounds difficult, but each movement is straightforward. A team of workers pulls the two leaf edges close, using the strength of many small bodies working in sync. When the edges come near, another worker brings a larva to the seam. The larva releases fine white silk when gently touched, and this silk adheres firmly to the clean leaf surface. You see the fine white stitches slowly appear. The workers move slowly, keeping the larva in the right spot, making sure the silk doesn't snap or mat. When one line is secure,
they move to the next section, keeping an even rhythm so the leaf edges don't shift. The new enclosed rooms are very tight against drafts, yet still have small openings for airflow. Inside, there are areas for raising young, places to rest, and spots for temporarily storing food. From a distance, the canopy looks like a cluster of hanging houses, each room linked by walkways along the branches. Working up high calls for extra safety measures. Leaf edges are often slick, so the workers make footholds by cleaning off the fine dust and laying down a light adhesive their bodies secrete. The stitching area is chosen on still fresh leaves because older leaves are more brittle and tear easily. In the rain, these hanging rooms take quite a beating from the wind, but because they're stitched at many evenly spaced points, their strength is enough to withstand it. When the leaves age, the residents sew new rooms on the neighboring canopy and gradually move their belongings over. You leave the green room and cross a narrow passage to another. Between the two rooms is a temporary dock for passing larvae back and forth when needed. The larvae are lifted like precious living tubes of glue. Thanks to this leaf stitching craft, the treetop nest avoids most ground predators while catching cool breezes and gentler light than the stifling heat below. A workday in the canopy ends when the rooms are sealed, the stitches have dried, and the leaves tremble lightly in the clear air. The leaf nest keeps growing with each firmly sewn edge, and the whole colony moves gracefully between rooms as if traveling through a row of houses in the sky. You go down into another nest, where the ground is slightly warm and carries a faint, pleasant scent. Here there is a fungus garden laid out on clean beds. The work starts with the leaf-cutting teams outside. They do not eat the leaves directly. They cut leaf pieces of moderate size, bring them back, chew them into a soft paste-like layer, then spread it evenly over the beds. On this base, the fungus will grow into smooth, white clusters. That fungal part is the colony's main food. Tending the garden requires an even touch, because if the leaf layer is too thick or too damp, harmful fungi readily develop. You watch the workers assigned to the garden. They constantly check the color and smell of each patch of fungus, discard any part that shows signs of trouble, and replace it with a fresh base layer. The old leaf bits are taken to a separate refuse area, so the air in the growing room stays clean. On the bodies of some workers, there is even a thin coat of friendly bacteria. This layer secretes substances that counter the harmful fungi commonly found in the garden. Thanks to that, the fungus is protected from both the outside and the inside. In the transport area, you see a steady assembly line. The distant leaf cutters send material back along clear routes. The leaf chewers receive it and turn it into a fine base layer. The gardeners set new base into open spots and cut away poor fungus so it does not spread. When the fungus reaches harvest stage, another group gently gathers the best portions and carries them to a temporary store near the brood room. There, the soft fungus is divided evenly for the larvae and for the workers doing heavy tasks. The work rhythm is steady and repeating, but every step calls for a sharp eye and careful hands. You stand at the exit and watch the leaf-cutting team return at dusk. Each one carries a green piece just the right size, keeping balance over the uneven surface. The nest entrance opens and warm air rises out. The healthy scent of the fungus blends with the smell of freshly cut leaves to create a pleasant feeling. The workday ends when the fungus beds are tidied, the bed edges are dry, and the natural tools, jaws, antennae, legs, have all been cleaned. The fungus garden is the heart of this nest, and thanks to it, the colony has steady food even when food is scarce on the surface. As long as the caretaking keeps its even rhythm, the life supply will flow continuously through the tiny drops of sweat of these leaf-cutting farmers. You step to the edge of the lawn, where a young twig lifts up with newly opened buds. On the leaf surface, tiny specks cling tight, their bodies soft and faintly glossy. These are sap-sucking insects the ants have chosen to tend. The ants don't leave them on their own. They move about regularly like careful herders. Each time they come near, a worker gently strokes along their bodies with its antenna. When stroked, the insects release a clear, pale yellow drop of honeydew that beads at the tip of the leaf. A worker lifts the drop with its mouth, passes it to a nestmate, or carries it back to the nest to feed the larvae and top up the energy of the heavy work teams. They don't stop at collecting drops. The ants also protect this sap-feeding herd from predators like ladybugs or small hunting wasps. On spotting an intruder, the patrol rushes in, lines up along the leaf edge, drives it off with decisive movements, and gives light nips to the intruder's legs. The young plant is less damaged on sections with ant patrols, while the sap feeders keep sucking steadily and giving steady sweetness. When an older twig runs poor in sap or the leaves age, workers carry each insect to a fresh twig nearby. They do this patiently, placing each one on the exact leaf surface where the veins run rich with sap. If heavy rain comes, they gather the herd onto the undersides of leaves, where less water lashes them. In a few pockets of loose soil, the ants even raise a relative of these sap feeders right inside the nest, where plant roots pass through. When needed, they scrape a small tunnel out to a root so the underground herd can drink steadily. You watch the afternoon harvest. The route back to the nest is busy but not chaotic. At tight bends, a worker stops to act as a traffic guide, letting each group carrying sweet drops move through smoothly. Inside the nest, the honeydew is handed to the brood care team and the queen's attendants. The surplus is stored at cool, dry points near the nursery. This steady rhythm of care turns the twig into a small farm, where each sweep of antenna is one neat harvest. By evening, you see a few workers rechecking each leaf surface. They clear stuck debris from the edges, dry the spots that got wet, and mark the places with strong sap veins to move the herd there in the morning. The work repeats, but every motion has an easy-to-grasp reason: protect the sweet source, keep the herd stable, and bring each drop to where it's needed most in the nest. Thanks to this persistence, the colony gains another steady food source, helping it get through days when there are few insects out on the grassland. You walk into a nest tucked beneath a layer of dry, warm soil in a place with little rain. Here, seasonal food swings wildly, so the colony needs an efficient way to store it. On the ceiling of a deep chamber are unusual workers. Their bellies swell round and taut, shining with a transparent amber hue. They hang from the ceiling by sturdy hooks on their feet, like living honey jars. The whole colony assigns them a special job: keeping the sweet reserve for days when the sand burns hot, the plants wilt, and insects grow scarce. By day, foraging teams seek sweet drops on wildflowers, collect sugary sap from leaves, or gather the sweetness from sap-feeding insects. When they return, they let these hanging jars drink a little at a time. With each drink, the jar's belly expands another notch, the inner chambers stretch evenly, yet the body keeps breathing smoothly. On the ground below, another crew keeps the room dry and clean to deter tiny flies and strange odors. When night falls or the dry season drags on, the colony comes to request the sweet reserve. A jar lowers a droplet to the mouth of the worker who asked and gives it back bit by bit, very sparingly. You noticed not everyone becomes a jar. It's usually workers a little older who seldom go outside and can hang for long periods without tiring. When a jar grows fatigued, the care team helps by supporting the belly, wiping away salty sweat, and switching hanging positions to ease the strain. If a jar falls, the on-duty crew lifts her at once, checks the belly for tears, and carries her to a quiet corner to recover. The nest even keeps a rotation schedule, so no one has to hang too long in a single spot. This living reserve has carried many colonies through harsh spells. When the grass is barren and hot winds persist, they can still feed the larvae, keep the chambers clean, and help the queen lay eggs at a steady pace. In some regions, local people know about these jars and treat them as a sweet gift of the desert. What matters most is that to the ants, the jars are not just storage, but members to be cared for like anyone else. When the rains return, whatever sweetness remains is handed out in small portions so the outside teams regain strength more quickly, ready for the next cycle of work. You stand near the nest entrance as dark clouds roll in and the rain slams down fast. Water spills into the shallow channels along the lawn, then rises to the lip of the doorway. In a few minutes, soil that was dry turns waterlogged. Movement signals sweep through the nest in a hurry but without chaos. The brood team gathers the white cocoons into one spot. The group nearest the queen moves her to the center. The outer wing starts hooking their legs together. They use mandibles, legs, and tiny body hooks to lock tight in rows. A second layer stacks over the first. Very quickly, a springy sheet is assembled right at the entrance. You touch it lightly and feel the water roll off instead of soaking in. The workers' bodies have fine hairs that hold a thin layer of air against the skin, helping water slide away. When the raft is complete, members who can't swim climb on top. The queen and the brood are placed at the highest, driest point. The raft pulls free from the earthen edge and floats on the brown water. The current pushes it along the channel. Those on the rim keep adjusting their posture to stay balanced. If one spot sags, nearby workers press in at once to fill the gap. The raft thus patches weak spots by itself without any central command. When the raft meets a dry branch, a team moves in, grips the surface, and pulls the whole raft alongside. A single file of workers opens a path upward, layers follow, and they push the queen and brood ahead. The last to leave the water do so after the rain has eased. The entire evacuation relies on a few simple moves. Hook tight to each other, shield what's most precious in the middle, and find the highest place to stop. Once safe, the colony shelters in dry pockets and warms up by grooming, combing antennae and legs for one another, pushing out pooled water. You sit and watch the water stay cloudy. Down below, a few other rafts are drifting into higher grass banks. This way of surviving has saved many colonies after heavy rains. When the water recedes, the nest will choose a higher spot, open the city gates again, and clean the floors. From one flood, the colony learns to cut deeper channels at the bends, reinforce the entrance with stickier soil, and plant more fine roots along the edge to hold the ground. Next time the rain comes, the rafts will be ready and the rhythm of life will continue without a break. You step into a damp forest where the ground is thick with leaves and sunlight slips through in narrow streaks. Here, some ant columns don't build fixed nests of soil or leaves. Each evening, they stop and raise a living wall out of their own bodies. They hook on to one another, winding into dense sheets, leaving an open space in the middle as a room for the young. By day, they open the wall and spread out along many paths to hunt. Their marching route runs like a dark ribbon across dry leaves, over roots, past rotting stumps. The rhythm of the column depends greatly on the young. When the young are small, they eat little, and the column can stay longer in an insect-rich area to gather enough prey. When the young are growing fast, the column must move more often to find extra food. Flanking columns travel along both sides of the main path, and in the middle are the teams bringing prey back. The catch may be caterpillars, spiders, or other swarms of insects. Everything is broken down and sent straight to that day's temporary center. As night falls, the column finds a large tree base or a dry natural hollow. In just a few minutes, the living wall takes shape. The outer ones latch onto the tree, the inner ones latch onto the outer ones, layer after snug layer. In the center, the young are laid to rest, warmed by the breath and heat of a thick ring of bodies. If it rains, the outermost layer grows a bit thicker so water doesn't seep in. The next morning, the wall opens and the whole column fans out in a new direction. No stakes, no rope. The nest goes up each night and comes down each morning with practiced motions. You notice many individuals here don't see well, having lived their whole lives in damp shade. They rely on familiar scents and the touch of antennae to take movement cues. Along the way, if a log blocks the path, a few workers stay behind as a step so the flow can cross faster. If there's a slope, a ribbon of bodies forms a small slide so the load-carrying teams don't stumble. All these adjustments arise from simple habits repeated again and again. When the young enter a quiet phase before becoming adults, the column gets a longer pause. They raise the living wall in one spot for days, hunt less, clean more, and wait for the young to emerge in numbers before continuing the cycle of movement. You travel with a column along a path pocked with small holes and shallow grooves. At open edges, the flow usually has to drop down, climb up, then continue. It costs time and slows the column. A few workers step out to the rim, hook their feet to both sides, and lock their bodies to make a step. Immediately, those behind step onto their backs and cross the gap faster. Seeing the clear benefit, a few more workers link on, extending the bridge to cut down the detour. You pause for a while and watch. The bridge isn't long at the start. If it stretches too far, too many workers are tied up in the bridge and the line behind lacks carriers. If the bridge is too short, the whole column still has to take a wide detour, so the bridge is adjusted to fit the need. When traffic is heavy, it lengthens to ease congestion. When traffic thins, a few in the middle leave their posts, shortening the bridge to return bodies to other work. This adjustment doesn't require anyone to count precisely. Each individual simply senses the density passing over and the amount of jostling on their back to decide whether to hold on or pull back. In some places, you see several living bridges appear in succession like steps, letting the whole column cross a rough stretch in little time. Load carriers move smoothly and spill less. When rain falls, the bridge thickens a bit to prevent slipping, and when it's dry, it thins to save bodies. If the terrain changes, the bridge shifts with it, never fixed in one spot. When the column ends the workday, the bridge builders leave their positions, groom themselves, move a bit to get blood flowing, then merge back into the main stream to rest. You look back at the ground already covered and feel one thing very clearly. The living bridge isn't a brief display, but an adaptive habit. It appears where it's truly needed, grows just long enough to make the whole column move faster and disappears when it's no longer useful. Thanks to the small decisions of each individual, the entire colony saves a great deal of time and energy. The path becomes shorter by just enough, and the colony's life runs more smoothly in every season.
You shadow a patrol moving over the dry leaf litter. Up front, an ant with very long mandibles is scouting the way. The mandibles open wide like twin doors, but there's nothing loose about them. Inside is a tiny locking catch. The muscles on both sides are compressed like fully drawn springs. While the lock holds, the stored energy sits quietly. A light touch to the antenna is all it takes. The catch releases, the jaws snap shut, in a span too short for the naked eye to follow. A crisp, dry click rings out. The small termite ahead is clamped tight and goes still. The team behind closes in at once to process the prey. Look closer and you see the mandibles aren't only for pinning victims. When danger appears, the ant sets its jaws against the ground and arms the lock like a trigger. As the jaws fire, the push launches its whole body off the surface. It springs backward or ricochets to the side, slipping past a predator's lunge. The hop is faster and farther than any normal run. That way it escapes tight spots without having to fight head-on. These special jaws call for a clear way of working. While staking out prey, the ant keeps close enough to trigger in time, but not so close the prey touches it first. When the jaws close, they don't always land on a weak spot. So nearby workers step in, hold the legs, and bite into softer parts like the head or abdomen to finish quickly. The prey is then cut into pieces of a sensible size to avoid tangling the formation on the way back to the nest. You watch the trap-jaw ant settle after a backward hop. It grooms its antennae and legs to brush off the fine dust clinging to its body, then returns to its ambush post as before. The sequence has been drilled so often it runs smoothly. The jaw latch is checked often with dry tests. If dust gets in the way, it uses its forelegs to sweep it out so the lock fires cleanly. A strong, clean pair of snap jaws lets the whole team feel secure on the perimeter, where they often meet young termites, tiny beetles, and other insects just the right size for the colony's meals. As dusk sets in, the group pulls back along the scent trail. The trap-jaw ant moves near the head of the column, still clearing the way and dispatching small obstacles. At the nest entrance, it runs one last check, snapping its jaws against the dry soil to wipe the surfaces clean before stepping inside. The day's work makes one rule plain: store energy the right way, release it at the right moment, and coordinate tightly with your teammates. That way, a blink-fast door slam isn't just a showy move, but a life-saving tool that brings steady food home for the whole colony. You follow a foraging party back and notice one individual limping. There's a small tear on its leg, oozing a dark brown fluid. At the nest entrance, two workers are waiting to screen arrivals. They tap antennae quickly, assessing the severity of the injury. If the wound is too serious to save, the individual is left outside to avoid bringing pathogens into the nest. If there's still a chance, they lift their teammate and carry it to a treatment room set in a dry corner near the entrance. In a dim, warm room, the care team uses their mouths to thoroughly lick and rinse the wound, removing dirt and stuck debris. Then another worker presses its chest to the tear to release a thick droplet with a faint, acrid smell. This secretion suppresses pathogens. They work in order. First, clean. Next, apply the secretion. Finally, keep the patient still so the surface layer can dry.
During that time, another group tidies the floor, collects scraps, and keeps the room well ventilated, without strong drafts. After about half a day, the patient can stand. If the wound is still fresh, they add a thin coat along the torn edge. When the patient leaves the room, an escort checks its gait. If it's still weak, the patient is reassigned to lighter duties inside the nest. If it's stable, it returns to the foraging team, but stays in the middle, avoiding direct clashes for the first few days. You see a simple checklist at the gatepost. The sentries take turns keeping a mental tally of injury cases, tear locations, and recovery times. Thanks to this habit, the colony can tell when the front line is facing higher risk and can adjust how often they head out or change the route. There are no white bandages or needles and thread, but tidy step-by-step care has sharply reduced deaths after returning from the field. By day's end, the treatment room is wiped down again. Surfaces are scraped clean of the damp soil that just contacted the secretion. The only tools are antennae, mouthparts, and legs, but used at the right moment and in the right way, they become an effective medical kit. You leave as another patient sleeps quietly in the corner, abdomen rising and falling evenly, front legs set neatly in place. By morning, if all goes well, it will take its place in line again, carrying a share of prey back for the fast-growing larvae in the inner chambers. You follow a small group that peels off the main path and moves into a zone carrying the scent of another nest. They choose the early morning, when the other side is still busy cleaning the floors and there aren't many guards. The raiding team moves in a tight file, silent. The opponent's entrance is narrow, but they only need to open a small gap to slip through. The target isn't the food store, but the nursery. There, white cocoons are stacked neatly on a dry floor. The group quickly lifts each cocoon, lines them up across their backs, then withdraws along the path they opened. You wonder why the opposing nest doesn't notice right away. The reason is scent. The raiders have coated themselves with an unusual odor that closely matches the area's common smell. As they pass the thin guard line at the entrance, they leave only a faint sense of something off, not enough to trigger a strong alarm. Inside the nursery, they avoid collisions and don't drop cocoons so the scent isn't disturbed. Only when enough cocoons are gone does the raided nest realize something is wrong, by which time the other group is already far away. Back home, these cocoons are placed in a separate nursery. Workers in the nest take on the care as if tending their own young. They rotate the cocoons, dry them, and check the shells regularly. When a cocoon opens, the new individual steps out into an environment saturated with the scent of the nest that has raised it. From that moment, it works for the new nest like any ordinary member, without returning to where it was born. This transfer of bodies happens many times a year, letting the raiding nest keep a large workforce without having to raise every brood from the start. You watch how the raided nest reacts the next times. They increase the number of guards at the entrance, lay down heavier layers of scent, and move the cocoons into deeper rooms. Sometimes they also mount counter raids to retrieve cocoons when the timing is favorable. This quiet dispute is rarely noisy, but it leaves clear traces in both sides' care calendars. Where the forest edge, the lawn, and the dirt bank meet, scent trails overlap, and the two underground cities pursue each other through such comings and goings. By day's end, you return to the nursery of the nest that succeeded in its raid. The new cocoons are set in a dry corner, well away from the walkway to avoid bumps. The daylight dims, but inside the nest, the care schedule stays bright and clear. Small hands keep turning cocoons, cleaning the floor, and preparing for the upcoming round of mass hatching. After that, many new workers will merge into the common flow of work, carrying the scent of their new home like a freshly stamped sheet of paper. You walk along a concrete path warmed by gentle sun and notice a small crack every few meters. Beneath each crack is a nest entrance. The odd thing is that these entrances don't clash with one another. Workers from one crack can pass through another without being stopped. When you set a scrap of food on the ground, you see streams of workers converging from many directions without any quarrel. They touch antennae lightly, recognize the familiar scent, then line up along the nearest route to ferry the food back. There's no brawling, only smooth coordination between groups. You walk a few more blocks and still catch the same scent. The lack of aggression between groups far apart shows they belong to one very large network. The colony odor is shared through antenna taps and by living in the same area. When the original source of these workers is the same and changes little, the scent differences between neighborhoods become minimal. So individuals a few blocks away are still treated as kin. The result is a supercolony stretching for many kilometers, running along the riverbank, through residential streets, and out to open fields. The supercolony runs like a massive supply system. Where food is plentiful, the traffic thickens. Where food is scarce, the flow thins, but the overall picture stays steady. When they meet an opponent with a different scent stream, a boundary appears. There, conflict can break out. But inside the supercolony, everything is fluid. Stores are spread out everywhere, avoiding the risk of losing everything at a single point. When a new human structure appears, like a planter or a temporary trash pile, the scent trails update at once, pulling workers in to tap the new source. You stop at a park and watch the flow spill along the edge of the paving. At times, you see a small team inspect a new crack opened by the rain. They mark it, send signals to the nearest entrances, and a few hours later, a side door has formed there. The supercolony has no central headquarters, but thanks to simple on-site decisions, it expands or contracts with the city's surface. The home scent, the trails, and the habit of sharing workers among entrances have turned an entire coastline, an entire valley, or a whole urban strip into one common home. As evening falls, each entrance quiets, but never fully shuts. Night is for clearing gutters, cleaning floors, and laying fresh scent along the routes just opened. By morning, the flow resumes. No calls to action, no jockeying for credit, just a response to the shared odor that stretches like an invisible map across concrete, soil, and wild grass. You are standing in a damp forest of tall, straight trunks. On a low branch, a line of workers moves tight along the leaf's edge. Suddenly, a slender-bodied predator crawls up from the underside, aiming to burst into the line. The smallest worker darts out to block it. It snaps its abdomen hard, its body taut, and lets out a faint hiss. In an instant, its abdomen splits along a built-in weak seam. A thick brownish-yellow liquid jets out, splattering the attacker's face and spreading along the leaf's rim. The stuff sticks like glue. The predator thrashes, its legs glued to the surface, its antennae stuck fast and unable to move. The line of workers immediately swerves to both sides to avoid the sticky layer. They pull the larvae and food through another route while pushing a few grains of dry sand onto the sticky edge to form a temporary barrier. The queen isn't here, but the order to protect the young doesn't need saying. The sacrificer stays behind, its body slowly collapsing as the adhesive pools around it. A few minutes later, the predator is spent, and stops resisting. The group removes what's left of the enemy by biting off small pieces and pushing them down to the ground. You watch the leaf's edge and see the sticky layer remain active for a while. During that time, no one passes through the area to avoid getting fouled. A small team keeps sprinkling dry soil over the adhesive to neutralize it. When the surface returns to normal, the flow links up again. The clash site is marked with a pungent scent point to remind everyone to be careful for the next few hours. By night, the area is checked one last time, and any remaining patches are wiped away with a gentle scrape. Self-detonation isn't always required. Only when the enemy is too crafty, too close to the brood, or the passage too narrow to retreat, does the small individual choose to block the doorway. This sacrifice doesn't happen often because the colony has many other ways to defend itself. Even so, when it does, it buys the colony time to reroute, protect what matters most, and steady the formation. The sacrificer is gone, but the sticky patch remains effective, a temporary wall made from their own body. You leave the branch as the forest grows cooler and damper after a passing shower. Behind you, the ants have shifted to a safer branch of the route. On the old leaf edge, the adhesive has dried and the sharp smell is gone. Another day closes with a simple, clear lesson. Sometimes you push the enemy back by force. Sometimes you plug the doorway with your own body. Every decision points to one thing only: keeping the colony safe, so that tomorrow morning the work of rearing young and enlarging their small home in the forest can continue. You follow the patrol through the damp forest, where the leaf litter lies thick and the air stays cool. At the edge of the trail, one individual suddenly breaks from the line. It doesn't follow the shared scent, but turns into the low brush. Its gait is steady yet vacant, unresponsive when nestmates touch antennae to ask the way. It climbs a leaf blade slightly above the ground, picks a vein with just the right stiffness, then clamps its jaws onto it and goes still. From this moment, it will not return to the nest. Inside its body, fine fungal threads have spread through it, taking the place of vital parts and issuing orders in place of the tiny brain. You stay and watch. A few days later, a thin stalk grows from the head of the commandeered individual. The stalk reaches into the humid air, where light breezes carry the fungus's scent far. When it ripens, a fine powder bursts out, falling onto the leaf litter and into the colony's busy thoroughfares. The tiny grains latch on to the bodies of passers-by. Not everyone becomes infected, because ant hygiene is strict. They constantly brush their antennae and forelegs, lick their surfaces clean, and help one another remove foreign specks. Thanks to this cleanliness, many colonies keep infection rates low even in a dense, damp forest. You realize the fungus doesn't attack at random. Each species of fungus fits only a few particular ant species. It needs the right host to complete its life cycle. So, under the same canopy, many different fungi can coexist, each finding its own path forward. The ants respond by placing brood chambers in airy spots, drying the corridors at midday, and rerouting traffic when they notice too many strange individuals stopped along leaf veins in one corner of the woods. When they encounter an individual showing signs of straying, the care team isolates it at once. They move it off the main route, set it in a separate area, and wash it thoroughly. If it revives and follows the shared scent, they let it return to the nest. If it keeps stopping without cause and clinging to a surface, they leave it far away so spores won't spread inside. This simple but decisive measure keeps the underground city safer in a forest always full of pathogens. You leave the forest while fine spores still drift in slanting sunlight. On the ground below, the ants keep to their roots and maintain their pace. Their brushes, their antennae and forelegs continue to scrape away foreign dust. Each day they clean the corridors, open vents, and keep the floors dry. In the quiet race between fungus and ants, steady cleanliness and discipline are the best shield the colony can make for itself. You stand beside a busy trail and watch two columns of different species just come face to face. One side is the group that can spray an acidic fluid from the end of the abdomen. When they rear up, they squirt fine jets at the opponent's face and legs. A sharp, sour smell spreads, making the other side step back a few paces. The other side is the group with a sting at the tip of the abdomen. They don't spray acid. They rush in, stab quickly at soft spots, then pull away. The tug-of-war lasts a few minutes. In the end, the acid-spraying column retakes the trail, while the stinging column pulls back to another route to avoid a drawn-out conflict. You notice something interesting in places where both species occur. One species has the habit of smearing a bit of its own acid on the body whenever a clash with a stinging opponent is likely. With this coating on the surface, the enemy's venom has less effect. After the encounter, they immediately rub hard to remove any residue that remains. These moves happen quickly, like a routine drilled every day. Thanks to that, in areas with frequent run-ins, they suffer fewer serious impacts. Inside the nest, the chemical arsenal isn't only for battle. During room cleaning, the care team also uses diluted sour drops to neutralize strange smells at refuse corners. At the nest entrance, some individuals are tasked with flicking sour scent at strangers trying to squeeze in. The drops are just enough to drive them off, with no need to cause heavy injury, because the goal is to keep the doorway calm and reduce risk for the nursery inside. You watch a short drill. Along the boundary, the sprayers run in a thin line, each keeping even spacing to avoid spraying one another. The stinger group splits into small squads, closing in from tight angles to reach soft spots. When they detect an intruder, they coordinate quickly. The sprayers make the enemy stagger, and the stingers dart in to push them back. This coordination needs no spoken orders, because alarm sense and positions say everything that needs to be said. By day's end, you see the nest entrance wiped clean of any lingering sour smell. They don't leave a heavy weapon scent indoors because the young need stable air. Weapons are reserved for outside, while inside stays warm, dry, and airy. By separating the living space from the field of combat, the colony both protects itself and avoids creating discomfort for the nurseries and the storage rooms. You return to the deepest chamber of the nest, where the air is warm and the ground is so clean there isn't a single crumb left. In the center lies the queen, her body much larger, her abdomen evenly rounded, her breathing steady. Many colonies can keep a queen for a very long time. In captive conditions, some have been recorded living for several decades. What allows the queen to sustain such a long reproductive rhythm is a small chamber in her body that stores sperm. This chamber works like a sealed vault, keeping the sperm alive for a very long time and letting her use it gradually according to the colony's needs. You watch the queen lay eggs at a steady pace. The number isn't exactly the same each day. It shifts with the supply of food and the need for labor. When the colony needs more workers, the queen adjusts so that more eggs are fertilized and will become females. When the season of flight arrives, the queen produces special eggs to be raised into winged females and males. All the adjustments are carried out quietly, with no show, and revealed by the clusters of eggs that appear regularly on the chamber floor. You look around and see the caretaking team working on a meticulous schedule. They replace the surface layer of soil so the floor stays dry. They gently clean the queen's antennae and legs. They bring sweet droplets and protein-rich morsels at the right moments so the queen doesn't tire. As the queen grows older, her laying rate may slow, but if the colony is large and food is abundant, the overall rhythm stays fairly stable thanks to a strong workforce and disciplined care. You notice something else important. The sperm storage chamber opens only when an egg needs to be fertilized, otherwise it remains sealed. That prevents wasteful loss of sperm. With management this tight, the queen can draw on this reserve for many years and still produce healthy daughters. The colony therefore doesn't need to keep making new queens. They simply care for her well so that one queen can support many generations of workers and carry them through lean seasons. When you leave the chamber, the air is still calm. At the entrance, the returning workers wash off dust before entering the inner sections. The life of the entire colony revolves around this room. One long-lived, steady, well-tended individual gives the underground city a stable center for many years, more enduring than the cycles of rain and sun above.
You're in a quiet corridor when you come upon a motionless individual. Its body has stiffened, the antennae hang loose, and the abdomen shows no rhythm of breath. Moments later, two workers come close and touch antennae to check. They catch a distinctive odor that appears on a dead body. It's like old oil, and it's unmistakable once the body is no longer active. Without debate, they lift the corpse, keep it away from the brood area, and carry it to a distant refuse site. You follow and see a small dump area set off from the main trail. There are scraps from the day before, the shells of prey, and a few damp clods of soil laid out to dry. They place the body in a corner and cover it with a thin layer of earth to keep the smell from drifting back into the nest. Then they return to the original corridor, clean the spot they touched by lightly scraping the surface, and rub antennae and legs to cleanse themselves. This habit keeps the colony from being thrown off by the scent of death. You recall a well-known experiment often retold among insect observers. When a living individual is coated with an oil that mimics the odor of a dead body, the workers will immediately carry it to the dump as well. That shows how heavily the colony relies on smell to decide. So, inside the nest, hygiene to avoid carrying unfamiliar odors is crucial. After passing through the refuse site, everyone scrubs carefully so the smell isn't brought back into the house. An ant funeral has no wailing, but it has strict order. The reason is not just cleanliness, it's also to prevent pathogens from building up in a body that has stopped moving. In some colonies, if there are many corpses within a short time, the care team will dig a deeper pit for burial and seal it with dry soil. All of this is meant to keep the brood chambers and the stores from being affected. You return to the main corridor and see the flow has already moved past the spot as if nothing happened. The death smell is gone, the floor is clean. In a crowded living city, handling the dead quickly and in an orderly way keeps every other rhythm from being disrupted. By honoring these clear rules, the colony maintains a stable environment for the young that are growing day by day.
You walk along a grassy edge dotted with low shrubs and notice the ground speckled with seeds. Some of the seeds carry a small ivory-white nub stuck to one end. This nub has a faint fragrance, like cooking oil just poured. The workers love this nub. They pick the seeds up, hold them gently in their jaws, and carry them home. Near the entrance, they gnaw off the rich, fragrant nub, then take the hard seed back out of the house and drop it on a clean refuse pile that has just been laid out to dry. This refuse site sits on loose soil enriched by yesterday's scraps. You check back after a light rain. On the clean refuse pile, the discarded seeds begin to sprout. Tiny roots push down into the nutrient-rich layer, while tender shoots lift up toward the light. Because they were set in a cool spot with good drainage and little trampling, many sprouts become sturdy saplings. The forest gains new trees in places not far from the parent trunks. These trees grow to cast shade and produce more seeds with fragrant nubs, and the cycle runs on. You realize this is a partnership that helps both sides. The plant offers the ants a fatty nub to entice them to move the seed. In return, the ants place the seed where it's more likely to grow. Left under a dense canopy, a seed can rot or be eaten by other insects. Shifting it to the edge of a clean refuse pile acts like a site selection, giving the seedlings better odds. In many forests, a notable share of new trees arise thanks to ants carrying seeds, shaping the plant community over the years. Inside the nest, collecting seeds with fragrant nubs is organized like any other foraging run. Scent trails lead to shrubs that are shedding seeds. When one tree's supply thins out, the trail fades to shift traffic to another. The workers favor the nub because it's energy-rich and easy to eat. They share the fatty portions with the brood tenders and with those doing heavy labor. You leave the grassy edge as evening comes on. A light breeze rustles the dry leaves. On the clean refuse pile, a few new sprouts have just emerged. You glance back at the path from the nest to the dump's edge and think about those steady trips that have, without intention, sown a small patch of next season's forest. Without fuss or fanfare, this simple, repeated work ties two worlds together, the world of tireless tiny hands and the world of seeds feeling for a way to grow. You stand at the entrance of a nest set against the brush line. This afternoon, the care team carries in a larva with a very convincing scent. Its body is soft, opaque white, its movements slow. When touched with antennae, it sends out vibrations very much like the feeding call of the young inside. Thanks to the right smell and the right vibrations, it is taken straight into the nursery and placed beside the real larva. From then on, it is fed regularly like a full member. No one suspects anything because the outward signs are familiar enough to pass the entry check. You stay to watch and notice the strange child not only eats what it is given, but at times also moves close to other larvae. In a few species of blue butterflies, such strange children live on the very food in the nursery. That is, they eat the stored rations and sometimes even the ants' own young. They grow quickly, evenly plump and strong, thanks to abundant care without having to go outside. Living within the familiar scent, their bodies continue to carry the nest's odor, which helps them remain safe until the day they pupate. One evening, the strange larva shifts into a quiet phase. It lies still in a dry corner, its outer casing gradually hardening. The care team keeps turning it as they do other cocoons, wiping the surface clean so dust won't stick. On the day it completes the cycle, a young butterfly will push its way out. Only then does a clear difference appear. A butterfly needs dry air and a way out to the light. If no exit is ready, it tries to crawl with the airflow toward the door. In many cases, the whole colony still helps unconsciously by sweeping the floor and opening a small gap, because they respond to movement flows more than to species identity. You follow to near the ground and see the butterfly's wings slowly dry as they meet the warm air. It beats its wings weakly and then leaves the entrance, flying up into the canopy. On the ground below, the ants do not lose their composure. They sweep the nursery, check the supply of new eggs, and tighten the entrance by reinforcing the scent at the door. A few days later, they become less trusting of larvae that show odd vibration rhythms or unusual begging, and the rate of imposters drops. Today's event reminds you of an important principle of the city underground. Scent and rhythm are the tickets that let you through, but a ticket is not always absolutely safe. The colony stays sound by keeping a regular inspection schedule, by always keeping the floors clean and dry, and by being ready to tighten procedures when something seems off. The chance for an outsider to slip in still exists, but the chance to multiply inside shrinks if the house is managed tightly day by day.
You pass by the nest's food processing area. Here, everything is done with care. Before touching anything meant for larvae, workers scrub their antennae and forelegs at a clean spot, licking and washing the surfaces repeatedly to remove fine dust. When they hand off food, they keep the portions modest to avoid spills. At a few points along the corridor, you notice very thin, damp streaks. Those mark places where specialist workers once set down a single drop of secretion with a faint, sharp odor released from a small gland on the body to suppress foreign smells and clean spots that get dirty easily. Watch the routine, and you see how cleanly the tasks are separated. The trash area is always placed downwind from the nursery. At the nursery entrance, there is a wash station built from the habit of brushing antennae and legs. Anyone coming in from outside pauses there for a few beats. The soil at the wash station is usually dry, free of food odors, carrying only a very faint, clean scent. Thanks to that, by the time they step over the threshold into the larval room, their bodies have shed to the minimum any clinging grit. In fungus-growing colonies, the rules are even stricter. Garden specialists constantly inspect the beds, looking for spots that show decline and removing them while they're still small. They place inhibitory drops along the edges of the beds where moisture tends to collect. A few individuals even carry a thin coat of beneficial bacteria on their bodies, like a light jacket. That coat helps block would-be invaders of the fungus beds, keeping the harvest steadier. The cultivation rooms therefore hold a gentle scent, clean floors, and no strange odors rising. You notice another steady habit. At day's end, a crew moves down the corridors, grooming the sections with the heaviest foot traffic. They scrape away damp patches, dust a thin layer of dry soil over the surface, and adjust the tiny wall vents so air moves well. These small actions mean the nest rarely faces contamination flare-ups. When a case of illness appears, the care team isolates that individual, sanitizes the paths it traveled, and resets the inhibitory points at corners with risk. You leave the processing area once dinner has been portioned out to each room. Today's reminder is clear. In a crowded home, nothing replaces clean habits, tidy traffic flow, and tiny inhibitory drops placed in the right spots. Thanks to them, the colony keeps the nursery dry, the fungus bed strong, and the whole group's eating and sleeping rhythm undisturbed. You hear that a nest at the forest's edge has just lost its queen to old age. You'd expect the city to fall into chaos, but here nothing collapses.
A set of female workers with a special capacity start changing their routine. They stop going outside, stay near the deep chambers, and eat more steadily and keep their bodies safe. After a short time, their bodies shift in ways that favor reproduction. They grow more composed, spend long stretches in quiet areas, and focus on laying eggs. You watch inside a room that's dim but warm. When many individuals change at once, the nest still doesn't allow all of them to reproduce. Brief, low-key clashes break out with little noise. Whoever wins stays in the deep chamber. Whoever loses returns to everyday work. This screening keeps only a few reproducers, avoiding messes in egg-laying rhythms and quarrels over nest scent. Outside, foraging runs stay on schedule, the stores stay open, and the larvae are fed on time. After a while, the chosen one becomes the new center. She lays eggs steadily, slower than the old queen, but enough to keep the workforce from running short. The first eggs hatch into attendants who lighten the load in the inner rooms. As the successor's body stabilizes, her laying rate rises with the food supply. Her lifespan is usually longer than that of an ordinary worker because her job is low risk, indoors, and carefully tended. You walk the corridors and see the nest calm again. No more gaps in the schedule, no trash piles left forgotten. The cleaning, storage, nursery, and patrol teams all have enough hands. When the next winged season comes, if resources allow, the nest will raise more winged females to go out and found a new city. The important thing is that even without a queen, the nest has a way to self-adjust, a quiet selection, with little disruption, but enough to hand the reproductive rhythm to the right individual. You stand at the entrance of the newly recovered nest and breathe in the scent of dry soil and faint food. This city has just rounded a hard bend, and it passed through by doing very concrete things, keeping the work rhythm, choosing the right individual, and tending the deep chambers well. Once the new center holds, the corridors feel familiar again, with even footfalls and the evening lines of workers bringing home food. You hear that a nest at the forest's edge has just lost its queen to old age. You'd expect the city to fall into chaos, but here, nothing collapses. A set of female workers with a special capacity start changing their routine. They stop going outside, stay near the deep chambers, eat more steadily, and keep their bodies safe. After a short time, their bodies shift in ways that favor reproduction. They grow more composed, spend long stretches in quiet areas, and focus on laying eggs. You watch inside a room that's dim but warm. When many individuals change at once, the nest still doesn't allow all of them to reproduce. Brief, low-key clashes break out with little noise. Whoever wins stays in the deep chamber, whoever loses returns to everyday work. This screening keeps only a few reproducers, avoiding messes in egg-laying rhythms and quarrels over nest scent. Outside, foraging runs stay on schedule, the stores stay open, and the larvae are fed on time. After a while, the chosen one becomes the new center. She lays eggs steadily, slower than the old queen, but enough to keep the workforce from running short. The first eggs hatch into attendants who lighten the load in the inner rooms. As the successor's body stabilizes, her laying rate rises with the food supply. Her lifespan is usually longer than that of an ordinary worker because her job is low risk, indoors, and carefully tended. You walk the corridors and see the nest calm again. No more gaps in the schedule, no trash piles left forgotten. The cleaning, storage, nursery, and patrol teams all have enough hands. When the next winged season comes, if resources allow, the nest will raise more winged females to go out and found a new city. The important thing is that even without a queen, the nest has a way to self-adjust, a quiet selection, with little disruption, but enough to hand the reproductive rhythm to the right individual. You stand at the entrance of the newly recovered nest and breathe in the scent of dry soil and faint food. This city has just rounded a hard bend, and it passed through by doing very concrete things, keeping the work rhythm, choosing the right individual, and tending the deep chambers well. Once the new center holds, the corridors feel familiar again, with even footfalls and the evening lines of workers bringing food home. You return to the old nest on days when the weather is mild and the soil is damp, like the start of the rainy season. Inside, every signal shows the colony is big enough and strong enough to raise a winged brood. For weeks in advance, the rations for some of the young were increased. They grew fast and filled out. At maturity, they have wings and are tended with great care. The nest entrance is widened, side passages are cleared so the way out stays open. Outside, small staging points are marked ahead of time to regulate the flow on the important day. By midday, with steady sun and a light breeze, the colony brings the winged generation up to the threshold. The ground quivers lightly under thousands of footsteps. The winged males and females take a short run, spring off the soil, and slip into the warm current of air. Aloft, they meet in pockets of calm. Everything proceeds neatly. After that, the females drop to patches of soft earth, snap off their wings, and begin to dig a small chamber for themselves. Each place a female stops becomes a tiny dot that could open into a new city. Back in the old nest, the pace does not slacken. The large worker force still keeps the stores, still tends the brood, and still extends the needed corridors. The departure of some winged individuals does not weaken the nest because they are not the main daily workforce. Instead, the colony prepares to raise the next batch of young to make up for those who have aged or been lost during the year. New entrances are still inspected each night, drainage grooves are cleared after a rain, and the nursery is arranged to await the milky white eggs about to be set on the clean soil. You stand at the exit and look up at a sky that has just filled with wings. A few small wings still glint in the sun, then vanish toward the canopy. Down here, the nest returns to its regular schedule. Everything continues at the settled rhythm: feeding, cleaning, hauling, guarding, and opening roads. One life cycle has closed above to open many more beneath the ground. From a single drop of scent placed on the floor today, tomorrow's path has already been marked, faint but clear. You've traveled with us full circle, from a milky white egg to a sky full of wings, and back to the warm room underground. The city of tiny hands runs on steady schedules, clear scents, and practiced motions, quiet yet efficient. Each year, rains and sun change, yet thanks to that simple discipline, a new colony opens again from a small doorway in the earth. See you in the next story when we follow the scent trail into another forest and open the door to a new city.